Hello, everybody. This is Gary Matheny. Welcome to today's edition of Liberty Observatory. It is February 2025. Liberty Observatory is unedited, undiluted, organic. What you see is what you get. So today's question is, do I have a favorite poem? But I have to answer that I have two favorite poems, and both of them are liberty or military related. One poem might be called Heroic. One poem might be called Anti-Heroic. But the second poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, is basically a mixture between anti-heroic and glory. We're going to start with the heroic poem. And that is In Flanders Field. In Flanders Field was written by a Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. As I understand it, he was a military surgeon from Canada serving in the British military during World War I. He wrote this poem around 1915. And this was coming out of the Battle of Ypres. I think that's Ypres. That's a town in Belgium. Of course, in World War I, they had entrenched warfare. And there was actually 5 battles of Ypres, first, second, on, till the last one, the 5th. And it lasts a couple years, so you really shouldn't mold it all into one battle, but yes, you can, because it was fought near the same community, along the same trench lines. And so it was a horrendous series of battles. According to the experts, upwards to 1 million casualties during this several-year period. It was the hard-fought area of World War I where every inch was fought for. You had the Germans on one side, you had the British and its allies on the other side. Well, McCrae was in the back lines, not in the front lines, because he was a surgeon. So you can imagine in World War I, military surgeon, horrendous things that he must have witnessed. And I'm going to lift something here out of his journal to give you an idea of what they were facing at the time. For 17 days and 17 nights, none of us have had our clothes off, nor our boots even, except occasionally. And all that time while I was awake, gunfire and rifle fire never ceased for 60 seconds. And behind it all was the constant background of the sights of the dead, the wounded, the maimed, and a terrible anxiety lest the line should give away. So this was the mindset of this young lieutenant colonel at the time that he wrote this poem. And it represented the mindset of the military personnel at the time. They were dirty, filthy, not having the time nor the resources to change clothes or bathe. Gunfire was almost nonstop, didn't end for more than 60 seconds. And so the constant battle. And then you had to see all the sights associated with the victims of war, the wounded and the maimed and the dead. And then finally, in your mind, you're asking yourself, are the lines going to hold? You know, if the British lines did not hold, then the Germans would overrun those lines and kill a lot of British and other allies in World War I. And so it was a very, very difficult time in which to be alive. And yet, we have the poetic. We have the poem In Flanders Field, And getting back to a moment, the Battle of Ypres, it was also, during these series of battles, the first use of chemical warfare. So on top of everything else they were experiencing chemical warfare before it was outlawed by the Geneva Convention. So his friend died. His friend was Alexis Helmer, Helmer. And because they were friends, and because Lieutenant Colonel McCrae was an officer, he held the funeral service. In anticipation of the funeral service, he wrote this poem, In Flanders Field. It's a very short poem, and I'll read it to you. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders field. So this last part, what really hits at the heart of what he's communicating. And that is, do not let your fellow soldiers die in vain. Press on to victory. So this was intended to be an encouragement form of poetry for the soldiers, for himself. It says here, and I'll read the last section again. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders field. Tremendous inspirational poem. The poem has also manifested itself in the form of the sale of poppies on Memorial Day. If you remember, if you go to Walmart or someplace like that on Memorial Day or Memorial Day weekend, you can buy poppies in order to raise money for veterans organizations. And so what they're raising money with is in reference to In Flanders Fields, because it is about the poppies. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow. So a couple years ago, I was at Walmart, and I saw some older guys. These guys could have been Vietnam-era vets, raising monies for a veterans organization and selling poppies. So I decided to go up and talk to them. And I said, do you guys know what these poppies are about? Do you know where they come from? Why they're used? And neither one of them knew. And these were guys probably in their 60s at the time. And so it's amazing how easily we lose sight of our heritage, our history. But I'm not blaming them for that. I was happy to separate a few bucks to get the poppies. And so here is an inspirational poem relating to the heroism associated with warfare. Not necessarily glorifying warfare, but appealing to our motivation to stick it through until victory. Otherwise, those that have died before us in battle would have died in vain. The second poem here is also a military poem, and it is called A Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And it was written in the 1850s, and it came out of the Crimean War, and that was, of course, also in the 1850s. And Crimea, if you guys know much about the Russia-Ukrainian conflict, Crimea is the southern part of Ukraine that has been annexed by the Russians. It is that part of the Ukraine that gives access to the Black Sea. So it's a very, very important seaport area that facilitates trade. And so basically, they had a tragic situation arise. It was called the Battle of Balaclava. And this was a small town in southern modern Ukraine in the Crimea. It was Russians versus the British. The British wound up getting in a lot of conflicts over that period of time of imperialism. Like they said, the sun never set on the British Empire. And so you had, in 1850s warfare, you didn't really have the advent of machine guns yet. That came up a couple decades later, though they may have had some rudimentary machine guns, but they did have artillery. And what happened was the Light Brigade was a cavalry brigade, so it was on horseback. It was a British Light Brigade, and basically the Russians had a solidified position. They had a defense that was set up to resist the attacking British. And there must have been some type of miscommunication, because the Light Brigade charged into the strength of the Russian line. They weren't supposed to charge into the strength of the Russian line. They were supposed to charge into an ancillary part of the Russian line where they could break through and allow for the troops to advance. But they charged right into the strength of the Russian line, right into the cannon fire. And this became a hot topic in Britain after the debacle because people were pointing their fingers at each other saying, how did you allow this? And then they'd say, it wasn't my fault. It was somebody else's fault. It wound up being attributed to miscommunication, that they didn't really know or understand the situation as well as they should have. And so this Light Brigade, 600 horsemen, were charging to the strength of the Russian line. And so only 200 came back. And here is Alfred Lord Tennyson's famous poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade. half a league, half a league, half a league onward. All in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the light brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the light brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew, someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed, at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army, while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian, reeled from the saber stroke, shattered and sundered. Then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell, all that was left of them. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the light brigade. Noble 600. So the most important lines of the poem, or the most famous lines, come from, I guess, the second stanza. And it basically says, forward the light brigade, was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not the reason why, theirs but to do and die. And so they realized, remember they 600 cavalrymen, 600 horses, cavalry unit, and only 200 returned because they ran right into a buzzsaw, the strength of the Russian line. And they knew it was screwed up. Probably the officers knew it was screwed up. But their consolation was, theirs not the reason why, theirs but to do and die. They were ordered to go to battle, and they obeyed. So here's the tragedy of the war. Here's the futility of war. That a miscommunication caused all these deaths. It's very, very sad. But then Alfred Lord Tennyson has, in the midst of that, towards the conclusion, there's glory. Glory not in the sense that it was a great thing that happened, but glory because these were great men. These were great men that followed orders and fought the good fight. So this is stanza 6, I think. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the light brigade. Noble 600. So you honor these men. You respect these men. Remember these men. Even though in the fog of war, they attacked a bolstered, solid Russian defensive line by mistake, you still honor them, you still respect them, and do not disrespect what these men have done. God bless you. Everybody have a good time. And we'll be back soon for another edition of Liberty Observatory.